Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also BitChute on YouTube, Speaking Podcast. I also have 4 other podcasts, the Awakening Podcast, the Meditation Podcast, Learn Polish Podcast, and Crypto Podcast, as well as I'm a podcast coach. So if you'd like to start podcasting, just hit me up. You'll find bio.link/podcaster. Today, my guest, please welcome Merit Kahn.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem. So you might let the listeners know who's Merit.
Well, there's many facets to Merit. I'm the CEO of SELLect Sales Development. We actually teach people to stop selling. We want them to start getting selected. So we spell it SELLect. And in my spare time, I do stand-up comedy. So that's a little bit about me.
And I've seen your comedy and you're actually good at it. So I suppose let's go into the speaking job, how you started in, I suppose, your younger days as well, but how you got into the comedy side of things as well.
Sure. The speaking, I was running a sales training, sales management training company in Chicago. And as part of my business development activities, I was doing, I was speaking at luncheons and meetings for business associations. And in those experiences, my only goal was to invite people to learn about my sales training offers, but I was offered money to speak and do those lunch and learn type things. And I thought, well, this is a good deal. I really enjoy doing those. And then the business model shifted and I started doing more speaking, less to build my training company, more just as its own revenue stream. And I really enjoyed that type of business model. So it became more of a keynote business and less of a training business. And then over the COVID years, it was more of a consulting business. So I was very happy to have both the training background as well as the keynoting. And I was able to, just modify and produce good work without having to have big stages as like some of my speaking colleagues. So the comedy part came about because I really wanted to be more deliberately funny in my keynote and training programs, because in training, it's easy to work off of somebody's responses. There tend to be groups, maybe less than 50 was sort of my sweet spot for training classes. And it's easy to interact with people and, make it funny in the moment. And I was always very good at that, like sort of improv kind of of the funny. But I always thought it was a magical thing, the way that a comedian really crafts a tight joke. And I thought if I could do that better for my keynotes, then I'll have more fun. My audiences will have more fun. And the unintended consequence of that was that I actually really like doing the stand-up in a club. And so now I do both.
Excellent. And because I've listened to one of the ones on the video, your YouTube channel, and it was actually very good because, just the style that you do it. But it was kind of, you were introduced as kind of like the coach as well, and you built it into your story. And I'm just wondering, is that something that you do all the time and you get clients from it, or was it just that one that I watched?
I do that occasionally. It depends on what the client is really hiring me to accomplish. So, oftentimes I'm hired for my straight keynote, which is really about opening people's minds before you can encourage them or influence them to buy your products or join your company or any of that. So that's all about, open minds, closed deals. And the premise there is really, the first step to a closed deal is really an open mind. So that's more, I built the humor into the content. And so the content came first, that drove the design of the keynote. And then I look for those moments where it needs a funny story, a funny interaction, or straightforward stand-up bits that fit into that content. When I'm doing a stand-up bit for a club, that's straight comedy. But who I am in the world is I got to leave you better than I found you. So I can do that in two ways. I can do that by making you laugh, lighten up, feel good, reduce your stress. And that's what the comedy's for. But I also kind of want to leave you with a good message in life or something that makes you, shift your perspective. And so I always bring a little bit of inspiration to my comedy sets.
Excellent. And yeah, I could see your positivity on stage anyway. I know it's like very upbeat and everything. So I like your style. So with the not selling, as a lot of people do when they try to, vomit their product on top of you, and you might just talk a bit about that, because I know it's the same for kind of people that are maybe coaches or also, speakers. They're doing the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly a place, a time and a place for the kind of program that is known as sort of selling from the stage. And there's an expectation and the audience knows it's coming, and it's, that's its own thing. And that's never really been the venue that I gravitate towards. I prefer something a little bit more subtle. First of all, if a client is paying me to do a program for their audience, for me, I think that is whole and complete in and of itself. And anything that I would offer to that audience would be a pure giveaway, right? It's and only something that would enhance the message that I delivered. So I'm not going to give away something for free just because I have it, if it's not a match for any of the things that I've talked about. So that has to be congruent. But sometimes I'll have a client. I mean, a lot of the way that it works perfectly is the keynote is really the starting point to a bigger project with a company. So because I'm not I come in and, a keynote is really about inspire them, shift their thinking, create a new possibility, set them on a path. And for me, training is, okay, now how do we execute that? Okay, now let's roll up our sleeves. Let's figure out, where are we now? What are the gaps? What do we need to do to get to where we want to go? And it's much more strategic and detailed, and it's really focused on execution and practice. And that's really how I view training. So in a perfect world, and I have many clients that have done this, they look at it much more holistically. So it's, all right, let's have Merit kick off the keynote with our organization at the annual event, and then we're going to roll out the training initiative. And so it's really this combination of ways that I work with them. Sometimes there's the consulting with the executive team, what do we need? And there's just a lot of moving parts to it. But that's really how my business model works, so that I've been able to expand my revenue streams beyond pure speaking and actually have that impact that I've always wanted to have with clients, because I started in a training background, it's always been about execution and impact and relevance. So I feel like it's all kind of come together.
Okay. And I see you're like certified speaking professional. Is that just because you got paid, or do you pay some organization to stamp it that you're a certified professional?
So I'm part of the National Speakers Association. I've been part of that group in the US for more than 20 years. And the National Speakers Association in the US is part of the Global Speakers Federation. So there's speaking associations all across different countries. And part of, every association has their professional designations, and there's many hoops you have to jump through to earn that designation. So the certified speaking professional is actually the highest earned designation within the National Speakers Association in the US. And it was a very lengthy, laborious process to qualify for that certification. It takes at least 5 years, because you have to track all of your speaking engagements and revenues, and you have to have testimonials from clients. You have to submit videos for peer review. There were a lot of hoops to go through. And so I'm very proud of that achievement. And that was earned back in 2016. I believe I earned that 2016, 17. And and so I'm very proud to say I'm a certified speaking professional.
And like, because I know you've landed a lot of the big boys, does that help open the doors then once, by actually being that? Because I know there's not that many that actually get certified, because as you mentioned, it's a long process and you have to prove your work basically.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those things that gives clients just that extra little bit of confidence that, you do know what you're doing. You're going to take good care of their audience. It's if I'm up against an opportunity with somebody who maybe hasn't earned that designation, it probably gives me a little bit of an edge. And for me, that's worth it. It's also, there's just a higher level of education and learning that's available through the National Speakers Association for people who've earned this designation. Because as you can imagine, there's probably a lot of people in the world that, they got a paper cut, they learned a life lesson, they want to share the message, right? It's, we make it look like a very glamorous business without people seeing all of the work and the activity that happens to really earn a place on a stage, to be that person, to share your ideas, your story, your message with a group of people that the only reason they're in that room is to listen to you. That's an incredible responsibility and a gift. So I feel like a lot of times people think that's very glamorous and easy, and kudos to those of us who make it look easy. But the truth is there's a lot of work that goes into it. And I think that's why even within the association, people that have earned that designation, we have our own little mini conference. We have our own little masterminds with other people who've earned that designation, because it's kind of like that secret society, which is not secret of all, of course, but it's kind of like, okay, you did that thing. Okay, you're the real deal. And it's nice.
And have you got your secret handshakes with the group of you?
Yeah, I was never in the in crowd in high school, so I feel like finally I'm there. Maybe that's just in my own head. I don't know.
I know that you have a blog as well, and I'm just curious, like, did the blog become part of the book? You might just tell me about the blog first, and then we lead into your book.
Sure. I wrote my book in 2016. And so I have a love-hate relationship with blogging. There have been times in my business where I was very disciplined and blogging all the time. And then you'll see big gaps of time where I had nothing to say. And how I always talked about my blog was, look, if I have something important to share, I'll write about it. And if I don't have anything to say, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. And I kind of appreciate that in other people. And so I'm not going to write just because it's 2 weeks and I said I would write. Now I'm on more of a regular schedule with my blog, and I do write every 2 weeks, but I have a cadence that I use so that every time I'm writing something, it isn't the same form. It isn't the same focus. So 1 week I might write about a resource that I found out there in the world that I found helpful, a podcast I listened to, a book I read, anything like that. So I'm sharing something, and there's always something, because I'm always learning. There's always something to share. And then I might share in the next blog post sort of a behind the scenes look at how we run our business, something about our model, something about a tool that we use. So I'm sharing from that, like, peek behind the curtain of the sales training company. And then there's other messages, and then once a month, maybe I'll have an offer, like, this is incredible thing that we're doing, or this has been valuable for our clients, and I want to pass along a deal. So I've put myself on a cadence, but it's easier to write because there's always some interesting topic, and I don't have to think about what's my focus for this post. It's, oh yeah, I've been wanting to share people about this new, amazing, crazy watch that I bought, which is not really a watch. It's like an alarm clock, but it gives you a little energy bolt. It's called Pavlok. And that's been my thing. I just wrote about it in my blog, and I'm just like, it's the thing that gets me out of bed without hitting my alarm. So, I love writing. I think when I wrote my book, it did evolve from blog posts, but actually, now you asked me this question, I remember when I wrote my book, it was actually the third book that was written and saved in a file on my desktop. And the first two books I wrote, I did nothing with. And so I finally got to that point where it's like, I'm going to publish a book. And I sent about 120,000 words to an editor. And I said, I don't even want to read this anymore. I don't even know what of this is same old, and what is original thought and what is useful. I said, read all of it. And then I want you to cut everything that you think you've either heard before, I don't say well, like what doesn't make the cut, and hand me back however many words we're left with. And that's how we'll create from there what else is needed. And she agreed. And so from 120,000 words that I sent her, she sent me back about 20,000 words, which was very humbling. And I thought, oh, all right. You know, in my mind, I wanted her to come back and say, I loved every word. I wouldn't change a thing. There's nothing to edit. You are ready, girl. That didn't happen. Not at all. So she sends me back 20,000. And I said, all right, is there any through line for any of this? And we read it and reread it 100 times and came up with this through line, because really what I was talking about was all of these things that we were told are universal truths. And I would find these ways to like poke a hole in it going, you know, I don't know that that's such good advice for sales or leaders. And here's why. And here's what I think, you know, this is the myth that we've been sold. Here's the shift so that myth can actually serve us instead of sabotage us. And so the through line became the myths that, you know, the book is called Myth Shift. And that's really, once we had that idea, then I got to be creative and look at, you know, I did some surveys to find out like what are popular myths in business. And then I looked around for the alternative perspective on things, and that became the book.
Excellent. And I know you're touching on the sales and the marketing. I've always been into the marketing. I love marketing, and I kind of, Dan Kennedy would be one that I'd read a lot of his stuff. But I'm just curious, who kind of inspires you in the marketing world?
Well, so I make the distinction first between sales and marketing, right? So marketing, in my view, is everything that happens before you get to a conversation. Once you're in a conversation, that's sales. So I do think they're distinct. And most people will work on marketing first because it comes first in the sequence. But I really have a strong belief that when you study sales and you understand the language that you are going to use as once your marketing works, you actually have a better opportunity to do effective marketing strategies, because you know how you're going to follow that up. You want all of that to be aligned. So I think it's best first to study sales so that you can understand how to infuse sales language in your marketing messages. So that's the first piece I'll say. My favorite, and I follow a lot of different marketers, and actually now maybe not so much, because now I've just hired a marketing team for the SELLect sales development business. And that also markets me in terms of the keynotes. So I'm a little bit more removed from that. I'm the person now who says, yeah, that's a good strategy. No, that's not a good strategy. You know, what do I need to do? Oh, I need to work on content, create a video. Great. I'll do that. And you push it out into the world. So I'm a little bit more removed from the marketing side than I was when I first started my business 20 years ago. But I follow like Robert Cialdini. I think his work on influence is incredibly important. And I think there's great marketing and sales messages in his work, because it's about studying what, you know, the principles that have influence over us. So I believe that if we want to be more influential with other people, it requires that we understand what has influence over us. And that's both from an external standpoint, you know, social proof, authority, you know, those kinds of things that he writes about, and also the things that influence us from the inside out. And that's where I blend kind of my thoughts about marketing or influence or sales through the lens of emotional intelligence, because I want to understand how my level of optimism or decision making or empathy for others shines through in my sales conversations, my marketing messages. All of that is a complement to how I'm wired inside.
And with the emotional intelligence, and I think you're a certified coach for that, yeah?
Yes. That's been since 2008. And that was just fascinating because, I would be training people, coaching them, and I had these two guys in class. They both worked for the same company, sold the same products and service in the same marketplace at the same price point. They sat in my class next to each other, learning the same training material from the same trainer in the same moment. And I think they kind of even looked alike. So there wasn't much difference in my mind between Stephen and Daniel, but Stephen would leave class and just put everything in action, and he was on fire and he had great sales results. And Daniel didn't do much with it. And I was humbled by that, because I thought, well, I can't take credit for Stephen's success if I'm not taking responsibility for the fact that Daniel has not done much different. There were no big increases in sales that we could point to that were a contribution of what he had learned in training. And so I had to look beyond the mechanics of selling, the mechanics of what I was teaching them to say, and the action plans they were doing. I had to look beyond that. What else was it? And that's when I really did a deep dive into emotional intelligence. And I saw that the way that Stephen was wired in terms of his optimism, his level of assertiveness, his self-regard was completely distinct from Daniel's. And with that knowledge, Daniel and I were able to get to work on different things that he could say to flex that assertiveness muscle. He was very strong in empathy, but not so much in assertiveness. And what that showed up like was he would call and check in with people. Hey, it's Daniel, just calling to check in. How you doing? But he would never do that next step, which is what I taught him, which is to say, look, I don't know if we should do any business together, but if you're open to it, let's have a straightforward conversation and figure that out. Like those words would never have left his mouth until we worked on the assertiveness. And then the words that he learned in class were useful. But until that moment, without that knowledge, it was like he learned it. It sounded good in class and he was never going to execute.
Yeah, excellent. And I love reading Jim Rohn, and I reread a lot of his book. And it was actually today that I was reading a part, and he was saying I could recommend a book in a 1,000, an audience of 1,000, and he said a few people will go out and buy it, the rest won't. And he said, he was on about all different things like that, the psychology of the mind. But it's actually brilliant to, because what happens is most people, when they do that, all they're doing is promoting the success, and they're just kind of the others, it's a numbers game. But the reality is, it's like the 5 love languages as well, like everybody's got something different. And the fact that you can analyze that and get the best result, which in turn, rolls back, because everybody's happy then with your service, because you're actually getting proper success, instead of just kind of, oh, look at my, because you could easily promote, the first guy went from, I got double sales, and say nothing about Daniel. And that's unfortunately, the majority of people do that.
Yep. I think there's a lot of grandstanding, a lot of posturing. We use the statistics that are more convenient to the narrative we would like to share, but that's not how I work. I really wanted to understand. I really wanted to be create a change, be the spark that shifted things for people. And I don't think I could live with myself if I didn't really look deeper to figure it out. And actually, I think that's the biggest, it's the secret that sales trainers for sure don't want you to know, is that it has nothing to do with the content that they're teaching you. It has everything to do with, are you open to receiving that message right now and doing something with it? And that's why I pretty much shifted all of my programs, because nobody's talking about that in my view. It's that sale before the sale. It's the sale before the conversation that might lead to the sale. It's how do you open a prospect's mind to even receiving the value that you have to share with a conversation to even figure out if you're a good fit to work together. And that's, when I think back over the course of my entire life, I've been in sales since the time I was 9 years old and opened a greeting card business selling door to door. I was always about, and I didn't realize this, of course, at the time, but it was always about first opening them to the possibility that they're going to buy greeting cards door to door. Nobody does that. You go to the Hallmark store, or in those days you went to the grocery store and the greeting cards were there. But I had to, before I could sell my greeting cards, I had to open their minds to the possibility that this cute little girl with a briefcase and handmade cards was the thing that you didn't know was going to solve all your problems, because God forbid somebody in your life has a birthday and you're not ready. I'm here to solve that problem you didn't know you had. So been doing that since I was 9. And that's the important piece. It's open their mind to receive the value, then figure out if you're a good match to work together.
Excellent. And I know you've got a podcast that you co-host, I believe, yeah?
Yeah, so we're on a little hiatus at this moment, but the episodes are evergreen. It's called The Smarter Sales Show. And my co-host is the lovely Julie Holmes from the UK. She's an expert in all things technology and innovation. She's very creative. And what we would do in that show is we took a sales challenge and we would process that through the tech and technique of it. So I would bring the sales technique and she would bring the sales technology, and we would tackle things like how do you get more referrals? Well, I would talk about, well, here's what you could say to get more introductions for someone. And she would talk about the tech that's available to track referrals, to build affiliate programs, things like that. So it was a great show. And I learned from every episode. There's always a bit of technology that I didn't know about.
Oh, that's a fantastic model. And how, because I only have I like 5 podcasts. One is co-host, and I kind of do everything. I just set up the time. So it's the Polish one, so she's the teacher, I'm the student. But I know just from a lot of friends in the podcasting space that there's a lot of friction sometimes with having the co-host. How do you make it work?
Oh, we had the best. First of all, she's one of my A+ top best friends in the whole world. I love this woman. And we know our genius zones. So I would warm up the guests. So, we did a few episodes with guests, and I would go out and find the guests, and I would write the summaries, and I would do the show notes, because that was sort of my thing. I like the words. And she would get us organized in an Airtable, and okay, now we have to check our levels for sound, and now we have, she would do all of the technology stuff, as you would imagine, and I handled, just preparing things and making sure we were organized on the calendar and our topics were good, and we didn't do this topic last time, and I just kept all of that going. And so we were very clear on our roles and our genius zones, and we have such high respect for each other that it was never, sometimes you listen to shows with co-hosts and one of them's like one-upping or something. We never had any of that. Like she learned from me and I learned from her, and our audience learned along with both of us in the moment. It was really fabulous. And now that we're talking about it, I'm like, I better get back on the phone with Julie. I think we should get it going again and start recording new episodes.
No, but I mean, like just stating exactly that, I think it's fantastic, because there's so much different software out there, and like whether it's testimonials, referrals, as you said, there's so many different things, and to get both sides. So yeah, I haven't come across any podcast like that, so yeah, it's one that I'll be starting to listen to. So
well, and we actually, to turn that full circle into speaking, we actually turned that duo into an offer for a keynote, and instead of a company hiring, 2 different speakers at their event, they got us, we did a joint keynote, and then each of us did a breakout session. So it really was the perfect scenario. On all levels, it was such a good relationship that really worked. And then we got a little derailed when she moved from Denver to the UK. So now we'll have to get back on track with that.
Definitely. And just finally, because I've looked, you've got a fantastic website, but like with the social media, I mean, I see, you've got everything on it, the podcast, the blog, the whole lot, but I mean, we're all bombarded with the different social media. So what's your kind of journey? What do you recommend to people?
I think the most valuable thing that I do to keep in touch with people and grow my audience is through LinkedIn and my email marketing. The thing that the problem with social is that you don't own those platforms. And so driving people and building an audience there, you're really vulnerable to whatever, the platforms and the algorithms and things. And so I've always been a big believer in growing my own email list. I always make sure that on my website, there's a good lead magnet. There's several lead magnets. We're actually doing some work to improve them now. But when I do podcast interviews, we're sending people to somewhere and it's valuable for them. They get a great resource and then they join our sort of email community. And I think that's a really important piece. But I think the other thing that I would say about social, sometimes we feel like we should be everywhere. And I really did a good analysis. I want to say this was probably about a year or 2 ago. And I thought, when are people in the mindset that my message will resonate with them? And honestly, it's not Facebook and it's not Twitter and it's not Instagram. It's certainly not TikTok. And maybe speakers are getting business there and that's great. But my audience is going to bring me in for content on sales and leadership. And when they're on LinkedIn, they're in that mindset. So when I'm really focused on being out there, like I would rather be known in that LinkedIn universe than be a TikTok phenomenon. Like my buyers are not, I mean, I know they might watch TikTok videos for entertainment, for personal, but I want them to be in the mindset where they're open to receiving my offers. And for me, that universe is LinkedIn as well as my email list.
And just because you've got your co-host that's actually good on that, because I've tried MailChimp and I've tried a few of them and they weren't working for me. Just curious, what email system do you recommend?
Well, I use the system. I'm in the Zoho CRM universe. I like all of they have an incredible suite of services. And as a speaker, there's an overlay on this Zoho CRM. It's called Speaker Flow. And this has been a complete and total game changer for me. Since many of your listeners are in the speaking world, it's like a CRM 100% designed for how a speaker runs their business. So it lets me track everything, tag things the way that I want, move deals through a cycle. It's like a brilliant CRM designed with me in mind.
So is it good for the coaching as well, for when you've got different clients?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I would say for anybody who's a thought leader, a coach, a consultant, a speaker, a trainer, any of those business models, you'll look at the CRM and go, oh my gosh, if I could build a CRM from scratch, I would build Speaker Flow. And because it integrates with an email campaigns part of Zoho, I can sign my documents through there. I do surveys through there. Everything is linked. They actually have an app that's connected to the Zoho suite of services called Trainer Central. So I actually left, Kajabi and all of those expenses and built my online building. We're moving our courses now to that platform. So everything will be in this Zoho universe. And all of that shift came when I signed on with the guys at Speaker Flow because I can call them. It's not like I'm, it's not like I'm buying Salesforce. Salesforce is a great CRM. Zoho is also an equally great CRM. But if I had a technology issue, I can't call them. Now I'm on like automated chatbot things. But if I have an issue, I call the people at Speaker Flow and they walk me through what I need to do. Who does that? So these guys have an incredible business, speakerflow.com. Can't recommend them highly enough. And that has been the game changer for my outreach, my marketing, just everything in my business is 100% more organized because I did that one thing for my speaking business. And that was right at the beginning of the pandemic. I had signed on with them, not knowing, it was before the pandemic started. So I had no idea what was coming, but something in me was like, you're going to have to get yourself a little bit more organized virtually. I didn't know, but someone's looking out for me. And that was magical timing.
Excellent. Listen, Merit, thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. You might let people know how they can get in contact with you.
Best way is my website. So it's meritkahn.com, MERITKAHN.com. If you throw a /podcast on the end of that, that will take you to a page where I have some resources for sales that will be certainly helpful. We have a sales SWOT on steroids. So you get to kind of look at your own business, find the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And there's always a let's talk button. So feel free to click the button, book some time with me, have a chat.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Merit.
Thanks, Ray.
So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. As mentioned, we're on BitChute and YouTube. You'll find the links in the podcast description. Sure to give us a 5-star rating, thumbs up, subscribe. Until next week, take care.